Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Living Manifesto Festival Part 2. Today is our first day of the festival, and we have our first guest speaker dialogue, our cluster number 3, continuing from the Living Manifesto Festival Part 1, which happened in January this year. And today's topic is creating an outlet to our lived experiences. And for that, we have invited performer Beck Heiberg and theater maker Juan Miranda. These two artists are working in some way or other with this topic. And we invited them to come into dialogue together to share their own works and ask each other questions about the other artists' work. So the way we sort of frame this dialogue is that each artist has 10 to 15 minutes to present their thoughts in relation to the topic, as well as their own work in relation to the topic. And then the other artist gets 15 minutes to ask questions, follow-up questions, or questions that pop to mind when listening to them. And then we swap it around. So another 15 minutes of one artist presenting themselves, and then we open up again 15 minutes to a dialogue. And the last part would usually happen a little bit differently, because usually we would like to do this live and have a live audience, but unfortunately there was a conflict in the schedule with one of the artists. So we pre-recorded this, and therefore in the last part, I'll be asking questions, and I hope that you will enjoy that. And if you have questions to the participating artists, you can always send us an email at info@thelivingmanifestofestival.com, or you can find the website of the participating artists on our program, and you may contact them yourselves. So yeah, I hope you will enjoy this dialogue. Again, today's topic, cluster number 3, facilitating an outlet to our lived experiences, with Beck Heiberg and Juan Miranda. Enjoy. Okay, do you feel ready?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Then I would say we start. Beck, would you like to start?
Sure.
Okay, then I'll pin you.
All right.
You may begin.
Let's begin. Okay, great. Well, hello. My name is Beck Heiberg, and I live in Copenhagen, in Denmark, where I am also from. But I came back recently after living 8 years in Paris and New York. So Copenhagen is still a little bit new to me, mostly also because of the pandemic and lockdown. And yeah, so that's where I'm at right now. And I work as a choreographer and a performer. And my work is a big mix, I would say, of working in more in theater settings, but also in performance art. And there's two very different legs of my work for me, to work in theater and performance art. But basically, one of the main focus points of my work has been gender and gender norms and gender movement. That has come from being a trans person myself, and coming out as a trans man earlier in life, and being a part of a dance school at the time, noticing how I was taught as somebody who was perceived as a girl, to then being taught as someone who was perceived as being a boy, and how different those two experiences were, not only socially, but also physically, like what kind of movement that you are being taught at dance schools, what kind of movement that you are supposed to do when you walk on the street, what kind of movement you're supposed to do when you sit down, how you're supposed to walk into a room, and all of these things in order to be being read as you want to be read, or maybe not want to be read, I don't know, but like that there are specific physicalities connected to our idea of what gender is, and how specific and like down to all like very, very micro movement it actually is. And it became very clear to me because of studying movement at the time of transitioning. And I thought that was, well, both scary, but also interesting, and made it my work to actually go into the specifics of that. And I have in my work, I have traveled from both making art about being a trans person, so that being a subject of the pieces that I'm making, and it can be with many different focuses. I'll talk a bit more about that later. But it's also later on becoming a theme about how I work, and not only the theme. So it informs my way of working, it informs the themes, but it also informs the aesthetic, and it also informs my politics on how I think the performance art and theater world should go about representation on stage. So there's a lot of different themes within this theme, I would say. And the question about facilitating an outlet to our lived experiences, I guess maybe the first thing I wanted to talk about in that is representation, because I think the question about facilitation is super important in this sense, because if we look internationally now, maybe for the last 5-10 years, especially in cinema and TV series, and especially in the States, but now also in other countries, there have been more and more focus on having trans people play trans people, and understanding why that is an important step. And like, not only because we then get to see how trans people actually look and how they walk and talk and et cetera, also we create work for a group of people that normally have a hard time finding work, but also to actually, like, I think one really, really important, how do you say, a really important point that was said in a documentary called Disclosure that Laverne Cox produced, is that if a cis man plays a trans woman, and then afterwards walks off set as a man and not as a woman, then the idea that trans people are faking it will continue, because then we see a cis man dressing up as a woman and then continue his life as a man afterwards. And therefore we think that a trans woman is a man playing dress up. So that's also like a very main point to why it's super important that trans people get to play themselves. But another thing is also, and I think that that's a discussion that is first starting now, because there was for a really long time just a discussion about like creating work and portraying like an image that looks like a trans person. But I think something that haven't talked a lot about is how we as trans people are the only one that understands all of the depths of our lives. So if we don't play ourselves, but also if we don't direct ourselves, if we don't direct the stories about ourselves, if we're not the choreographers or the stage designers or the directors, et cetera, like all of the people behind the scenes, or in theater, like the artistic team, we don't get to understand the depths of our stories, because then it will always be from a cis gaze. Our stories will always be told from a cis gaze, even though there's a trans person on stage. And I think that's a conversation that hasn't really happened so much yet, but very, very, very important. And that is something that I'm starting to work more and more with. And I think, especially when you think about facilitation, to an outlet to our lived experiences, I think that is, it's prevalent, because it's not enough to put a trans person on stage as kind of a token. So you have to, so basically it's like a director that is not a trans person can maybe have, and if they're not in a relationship with a trans person, for instance, can be really, really hard for them to direct how a trans person is in a romantic or sexual relationship. And it can very fast become quite problematic. Because it can become like exotifying or whatever, or just super boring and basic. There's also that. That's like the one part of it. And then there's also the aesthetic part of it. And I'm in university right now. I'm obtaining a BA in theater and performance studies. And I just wrote my bachelor thesis on transpolitical aesthetic. So I was researching how we as trans people, and how specifically trans people who are choreographers, how our aesthetic comes to life. And what I found out from interviewing just 3 people and talking from my own experiences, and then also reading a lot of theory. But so it's still like a very small amount of information that I've got. There's so much more to look at. But what I found out from those 3 people is that our lived experience as trans people, it doesn't only inform our way of being on stage, it also informs the way that we work. So I think like thinking of transpolitical aesthetic for me became a full aesthetic thought of not only an expression, but also how we work, and like how that a whole round thing of our productivity, I would say, or is different from cis people who are choreographers, and that works with gender. So basically, if we start with how we work, I think one of the main things that came out of it is that when for instance, when I transitioned, I cannot say that everybody who transitioned do this, but when I transitioned, one thing that I did, as I talked about a little bit before, was to like really read and understand all of the small physicalities that would make people read me as a man. So then I changed tiny things. And then when people started reading me as a man, I started unlearning that because it was too much, or I didn't feel comfortable in it. And then I twisted it around and I fucked it up, basically. And this was something that I heard from all of the other choreographers that I interviewed, that they had done that as well. And the fact of being able to read people's body languages is like, and has been something that you have actively tried to do constantly, because you're interested in understanding if people read you how you want to be read. So you also start not only reading how do you move like a man, or like a man, you know, or like a woman, but also how do you perceive me? So there's all of these like small interactions constantly where you're like, are you perceiving me the way that I want you to perceive me? No? Okay, I'm changing a tiny thing. What about now? Okay, now you change this. Okay, now you perceive me the way that I want to be perceived. So you really get very clever in reading also an audience or reading a room. And that's, I think, that whole way of being in a space is really informing the way that we as trans choreographers work. And it informs it not only in how we make art for the audience, but also how we work together as a group. Like, for instance, if we have, let's say we have 8 dancers that we're working with, how do they interact with each other? How do people read each other's movements in the room? And how does somebody's presence in the room change the entire dynamic of the group, or not? So it doesn't only have to be, I have about 2 minutes. Damn. So it's not only about what was I gonna say? Gender is also just about social interaction. And then fast, the aesthetic that is coming onto stage is something that is very much informed by a queer aesthetic. So for instance, like camp could be one of them, drag aesthetics, like aesthetics that comes from the ballroom culture, kind of like there's also something like dyke noir, or yeah, so like all of these aesthetics that comes from queer world or queer living. But then it is not only that, it is also talking about basically the aesthetics is taking on, but the difference between queer aesthetic and transpolitical aesthetic is that we are constantly aware of gender performance, basically. And queer aesthetic can also be about a cis gay story, and not have anything to do with gender, or like subverting gender normality or stuff like that. So yeah, that's, I wanted to do an example, but I don't have time. We can do that later, maybe.
But maybe how long is the thing that you wanted to share with us?
No, so yeah, it's not very long. I just want to show you some pictures.
Yeah, then I would say we just take maybe 1 or 2 minutes to do that, and then we move on to the dialogue. Yeah.
Perfect. So I wanted to share an example of a work that I've been doing with a colleague of mine called Charlie Leibantria, and it's called Digging a Glittery Grave. And what we have done, we're both people of trans experience. And what we have done is that we've been working with grief, but from a trans perspective. And that has made grief something glittery and a lot of pink and blue. And I want to share that. Just a few pictures. So this is the grave that we end up building throughout the performance installation. The installation is 3 hours long, and it's an open door performance installation where you walk in and out. So there's a lot of clothes underneath, all of this glitter and a lot of flowers and all of these kids' drawings. And yeah, some pictures of it. We also feed each other flowers, for instance. And we use water to share tears, so basically spit on each other in a way of like sharing body fluids with one another. There's also a bear head, as you can see. Yeah, so that's a few pictures of that. So just to get an idea of like what kind of an aesthetic that I'm talking about, an actual physical aesthetic.
Thank you so much, Beck, for sharing your thoughts and photos with us. And I would say that we move on to the dialogue between the two of you. It's Juan's turn to ask you questions or make comments about what you shared, and you may talk very freely, or you can really go one question. It's really up to you how you design these 15 minutes. So yeah, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Hello, hi Beck, how are you?
Good, hi.
Thank you so much for sharing these thoughts and these point of views. Super interesting. I just to open the conversation, I was thinking about this. It's interesting, like the physicality and this transition, the movement and transitioning. Like you have something there in your practice and in your personal life. Like this is also something I want to know more about you. Like these limits, or how do we also, if it's possible to split, no? Like what is your, I don't know, the universe you share as an artistic practice and the universe you are living as a human, as a mortal. And I was thinking about this physicality and the change and the adaptation. How do you feel? It's maybe more an open question, but also due to this format, also we are now engaging. And do you feel during the last 2 years your physicality also has to adapt to new realities, to how your body and your quotidian life maybe, or I don't know, did you discover something new? Because I appreciate that you had, or I felt from here that you had super good, you are super sharp in that, no? Like in observing this, the body language. And I am curious about if your body language has also changed during this past weird time we was having.
So like, do you mean like in lockdown mode, or are we like?
Yeah, like in restrictions, like transgressions or not, or what, for being a model also, because I think you present many things that I'm also have this question, or like when we need to present ourselves because in many aspects and in many fields, sometimes you become a model of something. This is also something that after, I don't know, can twist, or it's also, I don't know. Yeah.
I think, I mean, well, there's many parts of that question. The first thing that I'm thinking is very much like, I feel like during lockdown, I think my body definitely changed a lot, and my physicality definitely changed a lot. And it's very clear that it's like that all of our lived experiences will put marks on our bodies. and some that we can use, and some that, well, we can probably use all of them, but it depends on how interesting to us they are, I guess. But I think that there's something interesting about, like, if you're, for instance, have been super exhausted because you haven't done anything for like half a year, how do you then go into a working process all of a sudden? Like, are you going into it by being like, now I'm gonna bam, 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 just like work hard and get back into my old self? Or am I like, okay, I am more tired than I used to be. Like, is this the way that I'm working now? And then actually be true to where you're at. And I think that we have a tendency in our society also, I mean, it's the same with gender norms on our bodies, to have very normy ways that we're supposed to work and how we're supposed to move, and not actually taking into consideration where we're at as people. And I think definitely lockdown changed my body language quite a lot. And I was actually not very good at listening to it. So, and that's interesting when I'm so good at listening to my body language a lot of other ways, right? I was very much like, I just need to get back on shape, you know? So that's one thing. And then I think another thing that I have experienced the last year, I mean, I've worked in a production that, this is also how I know Nadja, is that I work still at a production called Pride, where I'm a performer on stage representing myself, but it's also representing some sort of LGBTQ community. And I think that there's something, being the only trans person on stage in this production, we're 7 performers, it's been quite interesting to figure out, like, well, how do I want to do that? How do I want to represent the trans community? Because how I spin it, and like, oh, this is the trans representation. Now it says my internet connection is unstable, but can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. And to constantly kind of weigh, like, what stories am I interested in telling, not only for myself, but also for the community, and how does that affect how I move physically on stage? So that's also one thing that has been in with me the last year or so.
No, I think are you there? Or... yeah. Sorry, I thought the connection was.
Yeah, I'm here.
Super interesting. And then you was also talking, I am super keen on this idea of, well, of also the how the trans gaze also it's included in the making or in the whole apparatus, like in performative like setups, or not only as a, yeah, as you said, no, as a token, I think you said, or like not like someone who is there to complete, like, okay, now we are diverse. So how do you imagine to, I was thinking, like, how can be a trans space look like, or how a trans space or a queer space, or I don't know, like, also maybe thinking in the production work, or in how do you work more in organizing your practice, if you have developed something around that, or any idea on how do you work, and how do you open this also in this trans vision, also in the way maybe you produce, or yeah, how do you practice? This is something I am curious to know, because it's I also, in my feeling, I don't know, like, we are just knowing each other by this conversation, but they were always in your thinking or in your line of thought, like this idea of, on some way, adaptation, and on the other way, transgression, like this. And I don't know, personally, I feel we are living in a moment now that is super moralistic in the arts, and it's super difficult to transgress something, to go beyond that, because everything is a model, and a model of acceptance, and a model like to, yeah. And sometimes I'm scared about this position that of being so, I don't know, humor. I'm missing a lot humor. I'm missing a lot. I don't know, like other ways of approaching. So yeah, how do you, and also this trans space, I am thinking also in a concrete, as the image you show, because it was this installation was also kind of, I don't know.
Well, I think that there's so many answers to your questions. But one thing that I think, let's just talk about the humor first, because I think that's really important. And because I also miss humor a lot. And I think one thing that is actually an aesthetic that comes from trans and queer life is humor, and is like, when talking about how we grieve, for instance, like in that piece that I just showed pictures from, we grieve also with tears, but also with laughter. And I think that there's also a lot of theory about this. Jose Esteban Munoz wrote about it also, that because our lives as queer and trans people are constantly painful. Basically, our communities, we die at a much higher rate. There's much more illness. There's much more homelessness. There's all of these very heavy subjects in our lives that we just live with. We live with them, and a way of living with them is also partying, celebrating, having fun with each other, having this beautiful relationship with each other. And so there's always pain in our celebration, and there's always celebration in our pain. And I think I think that combination of how we use humor also is very specific to our aesthetics. I think, yeah, so that was like the first answer to your question about humor, and how we like can use transgression in our performative work. And then like more specific about how a trans space will look like. I would love to know, but I think one thing that I can say about how I have experienced working and how I think about working is very much, and this is also something that's very inspired by Charlie Leventrier, that I worked with in this space, or with this Digging a Glittery Grave. Basically, we have been thinking of it as a very architectural way. So basically, every time we put something into the space, it informs the entire space. And if we remove something, it informs the entire space. And it's kind of like building on top, but also building on the side. Okay, it gets a little blurry and weird now, but we spend a lot of time not knowing. And I think that also is something that informed our lives a lot when I came out as a trans person. For a long time I just searched. I didn't know. And my story is not like I've always known ever since I was 5 years old. That's not my life. My life was searching and figuring out as I went, and trying out different things, and figuring out like, okay, is this something that makes me happy? Then I'll keep doing that. How does that then inform the next step? And that's also how we decided to work. So for a really long time, we didn't even have a title. We didn't have a theme. We didn't have anything. For 3 months, we were just researching within our space together. and building architecturally one thing after another that then leads to a piece. And I think that kind of open way of working is also very privileged to be able to do that. And I was very lucky that we could do that for 3 months. I mean, come on. But that I think that way of working really worked well with my, with like a transpolitical aesthetic, like the thought of that, if it makes sense.
Super.
We have 1 more minute, so I don't know if much will fit in, but please ask ahead.
No, I would like to know, like, this. Now you say you are at the university, no, doing new research, and I would love to know more about that and what you are busy with now or in the coming future.
Well, the research that I'm doing, I think I've explained a little bit about it, but yeah, so basically it is more looking to more specifically looking at different working methods and trying to figure out how a different trans choreographers work, and like much more in the space before we do a performance, because for me it was like very obvious that the performances are different, are super aesthetically different than when cis people make performances around gender. So I was like, that's not interesting to look at because it explains itself, but like, how do we get to that super different product? It must also be because we work differently. So I think, so that's what I'm researching, and I'm going to continue research that, but physically, not only by writing and reading, but interviewing. I'm also going to have a working group with other trans choreographers where we are teaching each other how we work, basically, and try to see if we can create some sort of manifesto. I don't know. We'll see what happens.
That's nice. And sorry, this will happen in Copenhagen, or where physically will take place?
I think we're not 100% sure yet, but I think Copenhagen, because most of us are based around Copenhagen, the people that I work with. Yeah, but depending on where we get the space.
Good.
Thank you so much, both of you. That was really informative, and it was nice to hear where your mind was wandering based on what Beck was sharing. Great, thank you. Do you feel that you're ready to share your work with us and your thoughts, Juan?
Yes, sure.
Okay,
sure.
Great. I will just change who is pinned. Okay, great. So the space is yours.
Okay. Well, hello everyone. Do you hear me okay? Yes, no? Well, my name is Juan Miranda. I am a theater maker. My work moves in between theater, performance, visual arts, and I investigate like let's say the ephemeral body of emotions, or the images and the relationship, what makes an image present, and the relationship between what is flesh and what is image, like literally, like working with video or with the and presence of the performer, or but also as a framework for research. In the field of arts, as an actor in Argentina, in Gran Buenos Aires, like near 20 kilometers from Buenos Aires, and this also marks a lot in my. I think it's something that it's on my yeah, I am discovering now what does it mean, this peripheria, and what does it mean to be all the time and kind of an outsider or someone who is welcome because you made a lot to be welcoming somehow. No, you travel a lot, you need to commit a lot, and this is in somehow. After now many years of practice, I recognize that there is something there that has transferred into my way of seeing or practicing. So yeah, I think my practice combine also. I exploring also in educational platforms, like I've been working in university as a teacher, also in a private studio. I've been living in Barcelona for many years. Then I moved to Amsterdam and I did there my last research. That is what I want to share with you. That is, I did the master, the Das Theater Master at the Amsterdam University of the Arts, and I finished it last July. So it was, yeah, quite intense, 2 years of super intense and focused work. And now I am little by little also, and also coming back to physical spaces, as Beck, we were talking before, and I am recognizing also the mood or the way I am entering into these spaces, like, or tired, or sometimes overwhelmed, sometimes super excited. And I would like to share with you some one part of my master presentation. That was it was called Pathos, and it was a 6-hour performative installation that was operating into spaces simultaneously. In one room, I was doing a performance during 6 hours. Now I will share with you some images, and in the other room there was a video installation where you could see 2 big videos, 2 big screens, and it was a dance class I had with my mom remotely. She was in Argentina and I was in Amsterdam, and the two of us at the same moment, we share this class with because she's doing a biodanza or something like that with a professor, and this teacher, she organized a class for us, for the two of us. And it's super interesting because this woman, Susana, it's a group of women, like they meet every Saturday. And when the pandemic started, she want to keep, the group wanted to continue, and they decided to do it. And this dancer, she thought that working with image was not a good idea, so she developed a system that for me is incredible. Like she created this group, WhatsApp group, and she was sending voice messages live to everyone. So like when you put play, then the messages concatenate, so they can follow 1 hour class, and Susana is like guiding the class and also like kind of putting music, and it's incredible. I really, and so we have this experience with my mom, and this outcome, this video, it's in one room while I am in the other room. So yeah, Pathos was also the conversation of these two rooms in the audiovisual and the performative codes, how they interact. And it was about, the family as the closest enveloping membrane we have, or the closest structures that sometimes supports, but sometimes suffocates, and in equal parts. It's a tension that accompanies us and defines us. And it was I said it's an ephemeral celebration of, I am reading like this, it's an ephemeral celebration of Tracy's under natural morning light, because it started at 9 a.m., like 6 hours. And yeah, and for me, this research on pathos, that of course it's looking for this, it's an emotional state that for me goes beyond these things we can name. It is, yeah, we cannot localize. It's difficult to localize where pathos is, but it's an extreme way of feeling something. And I think in this work I was researching on this emotional aspect close to the bones of the family structure. And I want to share with you a letter that was part of because the people can also come in, come out, like it was a free circulation. And I gave them like a big letter that I wrote to my mom, and I want to share with you this. I want to read to you this letter, and also talks a little bit about the work. Yeah, then I am open to talk and to share more things. So Amsterdam, 11th of January 2021. Dear Mommy, I hope you have had a super good beginning of the year. I would love to share with you some ideas I have or I am working on. As you know well, I am currently going through many personal challenges that remind me that there is no separation between the personal and artistic aspects of life. Rather, the personal and the intimate are always exposed on different tiers, but carefully interwoven with each other. You know that in recent years, I've started to think about emotions as an artistic topic to unfold within my work in theater. To be honest, I now realize that all this time I was thinking abstractly about emotions as if they were a concept I could work with, produce, reflect on, do something interesting, create, and all that stuff, you know, artists love. Now I'm quite surprised observing how feelings and emotions are taking part of my days without me necessarily having anything to add or do with them. All I need is just time to process and feel situations, people, thoughts. Time to digest and cohabit with emotional states that can change in a single day more than the weather does here in Amsterdam. Maybe because of this idea of staying within emotions, I want to explore what happened when people share time with us in absence. I am saying us, including you, because as you know, your image is performing with me in one room. I don't see that space as an archive or a document that give us account of the past, but rather as the presence of two absent images. There is other room on the other side of the building where I'm performing live, something like choreography without steps for about 6 hours. Both rooms are being activated at the same time. Audience can enter and leave the space whenever they want. What I am negotiating here is the idea of being present as an ephemeral act. Maybe it has points in common with the technique of mindfulness you are practicing lately. My friend and collaborator Paula says that I am using your body and also grandmother's one in that room. Now I realize that finally I'm doing a kind of family constellation in my way. Another discussion to have when I come down there. I'm thinking about this idea of sharing time differently as I was doing it so far. For example, in this new research project, I know at what time I started and at what time I will finish. However, in between, or for whom I will be doing it, is loose and more or less mysterious. Something that always hooked me in theater is the opportunity to know and manage a portion of time, how events are presented. What does it mean to have a good beginning? What will be the last image the spectators will see? I also used to rehearse the final bow as well, because I've always thought it is paradoxically the most real and fictional moment ever. That's why it's so hard to do it right. So let's say conducting or speculating on how things will be is my thing. It's not that I've been giving up on that, but I try to find other ways to relate to these issues. Now I am also exploring the theater as a safe space, a den from where I can openly invoke my beloved ones, you, and all those I couldn't hug, touch, or laugh with for a long time. In that space, even being present, I feel that other physical geographies open up far away. I imagine that it will be something similar to what grandmother Antonia described when she traveled with her mind. In this absence, I also become a shadow of myself, a ruin, a copy of an original that never existed. Maybe I just want to be an image, an hologram. Sometimes while I am performing, I try not to use the word acting anymore. People look at you weirdly. I use telepathy to talk with the people present. Sometimes I tell them directly, I feel like I am your cliché, as if I were your commonplace, your intellectually saying to you, this, what you are seeing, it's not enough. I can also be that which makes you embarrassed. At times, I feel that although you understand what I am doing, you pretend not to. I'm good at telepathy and reading your thinking. There must be something else. There must be something else. Something is missing. When you start overthinking, it is easy to think. It is easy to think detached from emotions. At that moment, I wonder who is absent here. As you can imagine, here I am sharing with you thoughts, random and addressed to anyone in particular, and also at the same time addressed to you. This private and intimate dialogue between you and me. And it's inevitable thinking in this moment about the two of us, or rather the images of the two of us dancing on the other side of the building. I miss you, Juan. Okay.
Thank you, Juan, for
You're welcome.
everything you shared and for letting us in to something so personal. Beck, would you feel ready to go on to the next stage? Great.
Yes.
Then you have 15 minutes to be in dialogue with each other.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing. That's very beautiful. The first thing that you talked about that kind of clicked in my head, I guess, that I'm interested in was very much about this presence, right? That there's like such a very clear presence between you and your mother and you and your family in general. but I'm very interested in hearing like how, if you can put words to it, like how that presence was with your mother in that situation when you were in the room, and she was remotely, but still in the same building in another room. Like and like what emotions came up in that, and how did those emotions inform your performance?
Well, for me, it was like in somehow, yeah, like it was really mom there, you know, like I don't know, like even if it was an image, and it was interesting, like passing by and see her image, this big size, in this context also, because it's also the first time I'm including and I'm start working with my family also in the performance, and yeah, like I was super present about, I was super conscious about her, like even if she was more as a hologram or more as a virtual thing, that and the intention for me was super like this, during the last, let's say 2 years, or this, not because the real restriction, but these other, how can I say, like the other powers we, let's say, we developed during the last time. I think it has to do with the many, for me, we are related with the intention, no? Like when you send someone, like, I don't know, your love, your good energy or whatever, even in the distance, you feel that, like, and you feel you are connected with the other one. So yeah, her presence was there around, and was super beautiful. I would love, if I could, like, I would love to have her also in the space, but of course she couldn't travel, and it was like difficult to share with her physical space. But yeah, she was.
But I mean, that also talks into what you said in the beginning about investigating image versus flesh, and how that connection, or like how that relationship is between one another. And I'm interested in hearing how your connection change when you're far away from people, because you say that you are very connected to people that are far away, and that you can feel their presence. But is it at any way different than if she hadn't been, like if she had been there physically?
Like, I think, like, paradoxically also, like, for me, something that has, at least I am putting in doubt now, this motto we use, like here and now, or the presence, you know, like the artist is present and all this. Now I am quite doubting about that, because instead of thinking here and now I feel it's like there, and I don't know, not now, maybe tomorrow, maybe yesterday, like this temporality, like what we are sharing, like something that for me was put in crisis. And also I starting my research before the lockdown, so I had a good and big crisis in a right place, because I was there for that, so I could in somehow facilitating my I don't know, my questions or into my work. So I started doubting about that. What does it mean to be present with someone? Or also, I don't know if it happened to you, but in the beginning, of course, we start saying like, no, like I cannot, it's not the same, Zoom, we cannot share, we are not present, like it's not the same. And after 2 years of experience, I would say I can recognize I had a lot of good conversations, and that that are still on me in a different way. But So the presence of the other, that's why I was saying this about intention. Like, of course, if we are having this conversation and at the same time I'm doing other stuff, of course, maybe the intention of this conversation would be in another, I don't know, going to another place. But if we are really here in somehow, but what is this space of here? I don't know. But I feel it also in my flesh also. So this is, I don't know, and it's not only related to Zoom and this, it's more also, sometimes you are seeing a live performance, and this is like more death than, I don't know, the Louvre, you know, it's like nothing going on there. And it's like, wow, what I am doing here. I don't know.
Yeah, sure. No, but I think that's interesting with to talk about the intention of why you are in the space that you're in, even though it is through a screen, and that is the thing that creates the space. Another thing, well, at least that's what I hear, but that's what I take away from it. But another thing that you were talking about in the letter was to create time, and then I was wondering if you have methods of how you create time to embody and stay in emotions that are informing your work.
Yeah, I think I did during I was working or researching in the studio, no, like when I was doing more practical. I remember I was quite busy not to name automatically what I was feeling, and this is something that for me, that's why I called pathos, because it's something that it could be another topic to try to define it, to try to say what is it, like historically also, like emotions, passions, I don't know, like feelings, like there are many like theories I've read, or like I researched for that. And I was thinking that pathos for me was this good umbrella, because it's a very intensive way of feeling something, even that sometimes can be super, when many times when think about pathos, is something like over, I don't know, Maria Callas can be pathos, of course. I don't know, Pink Flamingo could be pathos also for me, but also could be, I don't know, something that is super still and not moving, and something that is almost death. This is also pathos for me. In this apparently, something that you don't know if it's so live that is reacting like that, or is so death that is reacting like that. So that's why I think this staying and listening to these affections, that I don't know how to name it. And if I try to if I name it, that was the exercise. The moment I identify what I was feeling, like also during these 6 hours I was performing, of course, like I am working with images and I had a how do you say, a score. But in the moment this was super clear for me, I try to cut and go to another thing, because also pathos has something super close with exhibitionism and with representation, like this game, no, like I think I took it from Didi Uberman, I think, in a how do you say, in a lecture. I'm not quite sure, but I think he was saying something like, it's like the kid when recognize himself crying in front of the mirror and suddenly start playing with that. Oh, it's so real, but you also start manipulating that. So we are all the time playing with this, or I feel, no, I don't know, I cannot say all artists, but I, at least in my practice, I love to play with that. And it's so real, so real, so real that it's also fake. And it's so fake that it's real. And these contradictions, so I try not to really, when I feel I am really conducting what I am doing, I also try to listen. Okay, but what are you doing? For whom you are doing it? And also something that was super interesting for me, at least in the presentation, that during these 6 hours, I created like kind of entrances. Like I don't really see when people enter and when people leave the space. So I was performing many hours alone, like in between, because sometimes there are 4 people there, and suddenly I don't know, I look and there is no one, and I was like, what I am doing this for? Who am I performing for? Like, okay, and all these questions, and then suddenly that's I experienced that I would love to keep thinking on that. It's like this somehow this feeling or of please love me, please stay with me, please don't leave me, because people sometimes they enter and they left like in 2 minutes, and I was like, fuck, yes, what I did wrong, like why they are leaving, or suddenly they stayed on the contrary for 1 hour, and I was like, what are they looking for? Like I am moving to like this internal dialogue that you never know why the other one is there, and this presence and absence was literally in the exercise, in pathos, in this performance, because I start playing with the absence of the people. It was so strong when someone leave the space also, and something went with that person also, you know. And yeah, it's super weird. I don't know, how do you create intimate and you start feeling a lot about someone you don't know, and someone like, I don't know, and even with the mask and all this, like more barriers in somehow, but the presence, yeah, the energy, you feel something.
Yeah, for sure.
Just letting you know that we have 2 more minutes.
Okay. Last question then. No, you also in your letter, you're also talking about like moving, like your grandmother and like your mother, and I just I'm interested in that, like also a little bit from what we were talking about maybe before, like what basically like what is it that we learn, and what is ingrained in us, and what can we like take on and take away. And one thing that I think is interesting also that I've seen myself is like all of a sudden I see my stepdad in me, you know, and like we're not biologically connected, but I've grown up with him, and then like I see his movement in me, and I never thought about doing like moving like him. And I'm interested in like yeah, how you're using their bodies or like their physicality. Like you talked about your membrane, and like yeah, I'm just interested to hear about like how you have used that.
This one day I was in a rehearsal with my collaborator Paula Montesinos. She's also choreographer and friend, beautiful artist, and we were working, and she said to me like, because in that room I am alone performing, like there is also a video of the 80th anniversary of my grandmother. But it's more a celebration. It's not important for you to know that, but you see an old woman and this typical moment, 90s video, and this typical moment of the picture, like with the nephews, then with the daughters, then with the, like this, in somehow this legacy, no? And this idea of legacy, and I was there, I don't know, and Paula, she said to me like, well, actually you are sharing body with your mother, with your grandmother, no, because of your ADN. And even if like, and for me that was like, wow, this is like, and of course you share, like literally you are sharing this body, and for me it started being super precious, this like, and it was another way of being close to yeah, to these beloved ones, like maybe even we don't know. I don't know. I didn't know my grandfather's both sides, but I sometimes I try to play physically, like how they would look like or how they would move, because I am sure like that there must be something sharing this, and I think it's super uncanny, and it's super but it's super beautiful also, because it has a lot of playfulness in that for me, like to an imagination. Because also like I think when we were also talking before about representation, um, I think representation must always be attached also to imagination, not only to reality, not only to this is real or this is like, because it's like, of course it's another topic, but to play with this, with the imagination, I think is where things can be more, also more more trans for me also in the way you think of this, because you mix this, but also you feel free to explore, to cross borders, to really yeah, to speculate with your imagination, or what it would be if, I don't know. And yeah, and I think this idea of sharing bodies, and it's beautiful, and I think we are doing every day, and sometimes you recognize, as you say yourself, like doing a gesture of like, ah, I am like, you know, and sometimes I don't like that, but yeah. And then you try to change, of course, things you don't like, when you say, I am doing this exactly as my dad did it, and I don't like that, and whatever. It's not so easy.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you both for this part of the dialogue. It was also really insightful, and I have a few questions that I would also like to ask, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
So for you, Beck, I was wondering if, going back to the topic of today, making or creating an outlet for lived experiences, you talked about your own experience, and you talked about working with or researching collaborators, choreographers who also are trans, and who use their experiences as trans people to create. But I wonder if in your work you also think about how it impacts, or what impact it has on other people, or if you're using other people's lived experiences as part of your own creation, as part of your own practice.
Oof. Well, I think that's actually like a very layered question. And I think it really depends on of where I'm performing or who I'm performing for. And I think it's really yeah, I think I don't like not taking into consideration that I'm performing for an audience. I think so of course I take them into consideration, but I think that there is something that like there's a whole, like the hierarchy between cis people and trans people in the world makes it so that I don't want to cater to an audience that needs to understand me, you know. So I think that in a sense I'm also trying very actively to just do my art, and then people will have to understand that. And that's one thing. So it's like, but then at another point I am very specifically with using aesthetics that come from queer and trans scenes or arts, art scenes. I'm also catering very specifically to an audience that normally don't see art that they can feel represented in. So I'm thinking very much about them, I would say, when I create art. And then that's one thing. And then taking in other people's stories in the way that I work, or other people's thought in the way that I work. I think much more so other people's theories than stories. And like reading very specifically, for instance, Kate Bornstein, who is a trans woman and a theoretic in performance theory. Like reading her can inform the way that I work quite a lot. And yeah, so reading theory, I would say, more than stories. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, of course. I just wondered if you, because now you talked about a collaboration with Charlie, right?
Mhm.
And I wonder if you work with other people sometimes, or if you do more solo work, and if you work with others, if then you take, I don't know, if you work with their stories, or if, yeah, how you navigate between that.
Okay, then I understand. So basically, when, for instance, when me and Charlie work together, like we're also friends from, we've been friends since we were 15 years old. So we also have a common language and a common story. And so in that sense, we work with each other's story, but also with our common story. And when I do collaborations, I guess it really depends on, because I actually mostly do collaborations. I also do a little bit of solo work, but I mostly do collaboration. And I think it really depends on what kind of subject matter that we're using. Because I think that my way, like the transpolitical aesthetic, always will go into how I work, but not necessarily always go into the subject matter of what I work with. And I think it's impossible to go into a space as a maker and not have your own self in it. Like your story will always be there, but it's not necessarily explicitly told. So I guess it depends if we're working with something that is actually part of life, or if it's something that is more abstract. Because of course we still will work with our stories and with each other's stories, but it's not necessarily on like a one-to-one kind of way, if it makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And for you, Juan, I was very intrigued by this moment of talking about this experience of being in the space and performing, but not there being an audience. And yeah, the questions that went through your head throughout there being an audience and there not being an audience. And I actually wondered how, for one, the experience for you in terms of movement and performing, or the real and the performed, changed in that moment when there weren't people, and also how that affected your emotionality, because that's what you were working with, right? Emotions. And you talk about this, like leaving the emotion or going to another emotion the moment you start to name it. But I wonder if there was a difference between people being present and people not being present. And then, as a last thing, there was, because it is filmed, so there was always a camera, I assume, that was on. If that also meant for you that there at least was something or someone present, because there was a camera, a watchful eye. So if there's anything you would like to share in relation to that.
Yeah, this was recorded like the second day, and And of course that was another, how can I say, yeah, another way of being active or change completely, because you know that you are all the time being recorded. Yeah, for me, like the exercise that I would like to keep also researching is like how your body literally change the energy with the entrance or the leaving of another presence. And somehow for me was impossible not to respond to that. And not in a way of, let's say, backstage, on stage. It's not this exercise of or the camera. I don't know, like work I didn't like. It's another way of feeling, like when you are waiting for the action and you start doing it. Like it's what one kind of tension, but this tension of not knowing if someone will show up. Wow, was quite a thing for me. And it has to do something with, I think, with live arts. It happened to me, I don't know to you, but in many shows that maybe one person show up, or I don't know, and it's like this feeling of you feel super small, and it's like, who sent me to do this? Like, why am I exposing myself to this? Like, it's no one cares about it, but you cares, and this you cares. It's something that I think over the years, it's something that I am working on and making it stronger. Like, in somehow, as Beck was saying before, no, like, I don't know, this is something I want to tell. Then people have to work and try to understand or travel with it, or no, or say no, I cannot enter into your proposal. But it's not also my duty to of course you know there is an audience, and in that sense, for me, this experience about knowing that someone will be appearing, of course, but was interesting for me, not knowing there was no any kind of slot, so it was impossible for me to really know how many people or in which moment they will be entering, or how long they will be staying. And it's a lot of work with your ego, because the moment you feel I am doing I am entering in one now, like doing something super special and blah blah, and you are in the middle of something super connected, and the people is living like you are doing shit, like ciao. And other moments you feel you are super lost, like internally you are like, I think it's almost 3 hours more, 3 hours of this, and you are maybe in another thought, and people is there like super with you. So this is also a mystery for me to keep thinking about this inner thinking, and also sharing presence with other one, and yeah, it's I don't know, it's a mystery for me, but it's interesting.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that it's super interesting that both of you, in some way or other, think about the performativity and the presence and of people, and how it affects the body and the body language. So that this is part of both of your work. Yeah, and you mentioned now something that caring about your own work, even if nobody else cares about it, or nobody else seems to care about it, or nobody else is present. So like when I think about facilitating an outlet to our lived experiences, I split it immediately into two, and then I reconnect them. But somehow I think, me as an artist, how do I facilitate spaces or creations for my own experiences, or how do I include other people's experiences in my work, or how do I include the broader society, or the broader questions, so like the micro and the macro, and do I separate them or do I keep them together? Do I want to focus on the one or just the other? And in a way, that the thought just came that it can also be just for me, without thinking about an audience or without thinking about anybody else, that it just matters to me, that what I do is important to me right now, and that there's no need to necessarily go beyond that, that this is enough, that I do it and it affects me, and hopefully in a good way, or at least it leads me to something else. I don't know, that's where my thoughts went when you shared that, and I felt a bit of this moment where, yes, I have to remind myself at times as well that it's not how well received my work is that it gives it value. The value comes from my experience of the work itself, of the process, of, doesn't even have to be the outcome. I don't know if that makes sense.
Totally. And then also, I think this cares not to care sometimes, because it's like 20, they are telling you, this is that, but there is one that is telling you something, and it's always this hierarchy we put also to the gaze of the other one. And it's, I think it's a interesting trip to gain more experience on that, and more confidence also, no, in this moving and I don't know, like yeah, it's interesting. This, and also there are facets. I guess that there are moments you can be more on that, and there are moments you, as it's a work also, it's a practice, and there are moments you cannot be so honest in somehow. You have to sell it, and even if you don't believe in your work, you have to, in that moment, you have to sell, this is amazing, in order to get the studio for the residency or whatever. But honestly, maybe inside you feel like, this is quite raw. I don't know. I don't know what I'm saying here, but yeah, it's part of our work also.
I would suggest that if you have anything else that you would like to share with each other, or share with me or our audience, that you have some more time to say your last thoughts, share your last thoughts. And if not, then we can also leave it where we left it now.
I think there's so much to say, but I also think maybe there's just too much to say. So I think it was, well, at least for me, a nice place to leave it. And yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation a lot, and I would love to have way more, maybe at other times. Yeah, very inspiring.
Yes, same here. And beautiful how did you open also your questions, and yeah, and I will keep with me this movement and transitioning. It's something that it will stick on me. So thank you for this thought.
Thank you.
Then I would like to thank both of you again for agreeing to be part of the Living Manifesto Festival, and sharing your works and your time with us, and listening to each other as well, getting to know each other. And as you said, I think encountering new people, new artists from around the globe, it's really a great opportunity. You can take things with you, hopefully, and yeah, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you
Ciao,
so
ciao.
much.
Thank
Ciao.
you. Ciao.
Thank you very much for being part of today's dialogue. We hope that you enjoyed it and that it was as insightful to you as it was to me. If you have any questions that you would like to ask, again, you may write us an email at info@thelivingmanifestofestival.com. And we would like to invite you to enjoy today's program, which is 2 project releases, one called We Long Postponed by Malou Valbjörn Wedel, and the other one is called Firewall by Matthias Rabi-Raben. And then there's also a welcome event, which is a video of Annika Kompart, Nana Hanfgang Jensen, and me, Nadja Mattioli, where we give you a little bit of information about the Living Manifesto Festival, how it was conceptualized, and why we believe it's important to create this festival. So yeah, and then don't forget that we have another 3 days of full program every day at 6 o'clock in the afternoon, Central European time. We release new projects, and then we also have each evening either an artist talk live, or we have a dialogue with 2 guest speakers, and you can find all this information on our website. So www.livingmanifesto.com. Thank you for passing through. We hope you enjoy it. Have a good night.